And as the Australian shape of the Australian curriculum, the arts is up for all of us to have a conversation about. And today I'm going to be leading that conversation. My name's Josphine. I'm a Queensland Studies Authority Principal Project Officer, and formerly I was part of the ACARA team that were working on the draft shape paper. We are so lucky today to have a series of very special guests that are going to also participate in this conversation. I'm going to introduce them briefly now, but we're going to have time to find out a little bit more about each of them. First of all, we have the lead writer of the arts shape paper here, Professor John O'Toole. So could you please make Professor John O'Toole welcome? Dr. Michael Dezuanni, a member of the discipline contributors who helped establish this draft shape paper, is here with us today. I know both John and Michael are familiar to many of you, but please welcome Dr. Michael Dezuanni. Julie Dyson, sitting in the middle, may also be a familiar face to many of you if you're involved in Ausdance, but Julie Dyson is the executive of the National Advocates for Arts Education. Did I get that one correct? Check. Tick. And Julie's been very significant in establishing the initial dialogue with ACARA around the development of this paper. So please welcome Julie today. Professor Margaret Barrett's the head of music at UQ and head of the School of Music at UQ, and Professor Barrett is also one of the discipline contributors to the paper. So thank you so much for being here today. And Cindy Hales is here representing the visual arts, and Cindy and I have been working together as a member of the arts reference group who contributed to the paper, and Cindy currently is working with the Department of Education. Is that correct? Yeah, great. Thank you, Cindy, for being here today. The reason I'm using a microphone is because we are actually recording today's session, and we tried to set up an Illuminate session so we could have some questions coming in from around the state. We're having a little bit of problems with that. So I just wanted to let you know that we are recording. We will be putting the roaming mic around and then posting this material in a range of different sites for other people to access. So if you are uncomfortable with perhaps your image being captured, it might be an idea to move towards the back, but most of the images will be coming from the front. It's also my job to let you know that if the arts set the world on fire, or particularly this room, we need to exit via the door on this side and go out towards the ring road. That's the safest place to be, and the ladies and gentlemen's toilets are on the way. So today's conversation about the shape of the Australian curriculum, the arts. One of the most significant protocols I'd really like to establish early today is that we will be talking together. So we've got a little bit of time up front to make sure everyone has a shared understanding of the paper with John. But it really is about a dialogue that includes all of the art forms at all phases of schooling and a whole range of learning sites. And that's what this group represents. So your expertise and input is the reason we're here. This consultation process, as it has been with all the ACARA shape papers, is about understanding what you think. Will this make sense? Is this operational? Will this allow you to continue with your excellent practice? Will this help solve gaps in practice? Will it enable people who haven't been brave enough to take the step into arts educational practice with their young people, particularly in primary and middle schools? Will this encourage them to do so? And there's some of the issues that we would really like to hear from you about. Your agenda that was sent around actually had the questions that ACARA is using to focus the conversation today. So we'll also refer to those questions as we go through. So as presenters are speaking, it might be worth considering their thoughts in light of those questions as well. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce John to give us an overview of the shape of the Australian curriculum, the arts.
In a way, the first steps for this belong, the credit belongs to two of the people more than anybody else among here. Joe, who was the first senior project officer and kicked the whole process off, and Julie, as the chair of the Advocates for Arts Education, was the most influential and successful body that helped create, that got us into the arts belatedly, but that's not been a bad thing, the fact that we are in a little bit late, I think. So NAA and Joe are the reasons we're all sitting here in a sense. I'm going straight into just describe the background of the process and our thinking, if that's all right. Am I? So you probably haven't heard a word I've said anyway. Okay. Am I recording? Yeah, good. Okay. We started with a reference group that was picked by ACARA with the influence of its senior project officer very evident. It was very widely representative of school systems, of all art forms and of all age ranges. About 28 people, including all of us here, were on that reference group. And we came up with a number of basic recommendations. We had a couple of fantastic whole-day meetings where the first thing that was very obvious was how coherent and how together the community was. So the first thing, in a way, we were given by the successful campaign of NAAE, we were given the fact that we're going to be working with what happens in most states anyway, which is 5 art forms as the basis of the curriculum. Dance, drama, media, arts, music, and visual arts. You'll notice in alphabetical order only. We changed the name media to media arts because, as a little bit later in the process, because Michael might want to talk about that, but we wanted to identify those aspects of media which are taught specifically for aesthetic or artistic outcomes as being what the media in this curriculum is about. Sometimes it blurs in 1 or 2 other curriculums, so we wanted to be clear that this is about the arts and the aesthetic. The first, and not entirely unanimous, but very overwhelmingly agreed principle was that all the arts had equal basic entitlement, that every child in Australia should have a basic foundation of all the arts, from which later on they can then make an informed decision about whether they want to be involved in the arts later on, and if so, which ones. We also, rather hopefully, suggested that that this might apply from years K to 8. We didn't really expect ACARA to agree to that, but they have. So that's an absolute core principle of this curriculum. We managed to negotiate a basic time allocation, which I'll come back to in a minute, of a minimum of 2 hours a week in what is, as you all know, a school curriculum of about 25 hours a week, which kids spend in schools, and of which perhaps 20 is spent on subject areas. And it's the same as most of the other subjects. We're getting no more, no less than the other national curriculum subjects. I'll come down to how we propose to use that later on. We wanted to make the point that as well as the basic foundation that every child should be entitled to, there would be additional learning available, that specialised learning in each of the art forms would be available. Now, we know that not all schools can offer all art forms from years P to 12 at a higher level, and we recognise that some kids will do better in some art forms than others. But so long as they've got that basic entitlement, we have also, as it happens, we have written a section of additional learning for each of the art forms, which doesn't at the moment appear in the paper. It's there, though. It's just tucked away in ACARA's vaults, and it will be used in the creation of the final papers of the curriculum itself. We wanted to be absolutely determined that there would be no dilution in years 9 to 12. And we wanted the curriculum to be aspirational, not lowest common denominator. Not a curriculum that any teacher or preschool teacher could teach now without having to do any extra learning in the arts. That means it's going to be a challenge for teachers. I'll come back to that again in a moment. But we didn't want it to be just a lowest common denominator syllabus. And in that, the strongest advocates were the teachers and teacher representatives themselves. They were saying, for years we have wanted the arts to have an imperative. If it's not taught in school, where it's not taught in schools, it's because it doesn't have to be taught. There are far more important imperatives always hitting us, more literacy and numeracy. And that if you give us a mandate and give us an imperative, we'll welcome it. I might ask Cindy to expatiate on that a little bit more. And we wanted to establish the notion that instead of fighting about whether we're talking about teaching the arts as art form or teaching the arts as a lump, we wanted to get over that mythological dichotomy. The arts are complementary, they are also separate, they're distinct, diverse languages. I don't need to tell any of you people that. But they also value add to each other enormously. So any good teacher knows how to teach them separately, and any good teacher knows how to teach them together. And we figure that's how we will construct this curriculum. We're preferring, on the whole, to use the word connectivity, mainly because the word integration tends to send people into sharp decline, particularly in some art forms. Following that reference group, 5 lead writers were chosen. Margaret for music, Michael for media, Elizabeth Grierson for visual arts, and Jeff Miners for dance, and myself for drama, and also to take the coordinating role. And we met with a smaller, but again, very representative advisory group, still including Cindy. And we identified immediately a number of very key principles which are just as important. First of all, we said all children have arts capability and entitlement, and that all is crucial, not just all in all regions, but all types of children, all cultures of children, all ages of children. This is inclusive education. Now, creativity, imagination, and play are central. Now, the inclusion of the word play has caused a little bit of flutter in the dovecotes by someone suggesting that we're talking about you can learn by playing around. No, that's not what we're talking about. If you read the document carefully and read behind the document too, we're talking about the close link between play and the arts. That play, if you look at a young child playing, they are developing artistic form as they play, and there is a strong playful element in most art. The two are connected at both child and adult level. In the words I came across, just after we'd written almost the same words in the document, I came across this quote by André Breton, the surrealist poet and painter. Play and being playful gives us as artists access to new possible worlds, which you'll find in our document, and leads us towards an apprehension of the marvellous. I swear I hadn't read that before we wrote the document, but it's what we're on about. Arts knowing is sensory, cognitive and affective. Come back to what we mean by that. That's why it's central to learning, but it's also why it's sometimes difficult for schools, because it provides an experience that engages the brain, body and emotions all together. Whereas, as we know, orthodox schooling tends to concentrate on the cognitive aspects of knowledge that can only be explained and learned in words and numbers. The arts are culturally mediated, and cultural aspects are very important, will be very important in the development of this curriculum. Full understanding is practice-driven. It is also dependent on critical thinking and knowledge, but it's we're not starting from any received canon or heritage like they do in arts education in some European countries. We're going to take what is in fact a well-established Australian tradition of starting from practice.